Welcome back everyone to another vlog of X-treme Superhero. Today, we're going to be doing a base modeling for the backgrounds I'm going to be using. As I've said in previous videos, I'm restraining myself to keep building this world one vertex at a time with a list. So for this video, I'll be doing a basic modeling of the scenarios needed for the first 5 chapters as well as the rest of the series. This is part 1. In part 2, I'll fill the spaces with props and add proper materials and textures. The scenarios I'll be modeling today are Marcus' new apartment, some office spaces, main streets, and Marcus' school. I begin by opening a new Blender project and importing a house blueprint made on 4plancreator.net. I made it on this page so I can have a good idea of the size of the space and what actually fits inside this small apartment and how. Once imported on Blender, I take the default cube and begin scaling it to the size of the apartment in meters. I scale the blueprint to the actual size. As you may know, the default shapes of Blender sit at around 2 meters, so do the references, which makes it important to scale them properly. This is helpful practice, especially if you're going to work with particles or simulations, or you plan on recreating or basing yourself on real-life objects so you don't get these problems. Once the mesh is sized properly and the scale has been applied, I enter edit mode and I open the Mesh Edit Mode Overlays options window and click to show the edge length under measurement. Then begin adding loop cuts and move them to where the walls are to mark them properly, making sure the measurement aligns as close as possible. I hide the top faces, i.e. the ceiling, and duplicate the model and fit the new mesh inside the existing mesh. It'll make sense soon, I promise. I make the cuts of each room and cut around to make each individual room as a cube. I reveal everything and begin making cuts on the inside cubes and the mesh around it. This is to mark the windows. Once everything is aligned, I extrude the faces to each other to make the windows. I then add loop cuts and shape the doors to extrude them. With these doors, I'll connect the outside mesh to the individual rooms. Once the mesh of the door is extruded, I rip the faces of the doors and hide them to connect the rooms to the outside mesh. Then, I bring back the doors and just turn them into doors. I want them separate from the house so I can rig them and animate them on scenes where they need to be open or closed or someone is just using them. With this, the base interior of the apartment is done, but I need to make establishing shots for the apartment and I'm thinking of using the space for storytelling later on, just like I'm used to doing. Which is why I begin modeling the rest of the building. I duplicate the apartment and flip it like the building would be built. I fix the normal and erase the interior rooms and extra geometry, keeping only the outside faces. We're not really going to enter other people's homes. Then, I join the 2 apartments together and make some geometry to close the space in between the windows at the back of the apartments. I take the ceiling and floor and extrude them on the Z-axis. Then I hide the mesh and do some adjustments to the windows just so I can maneuver them and handle transparency and reflections. I take this geometry and duplicate it to both sides while getting rid of the geometry that's unnecessary. I take the mesh at the level of the door entrance and extrude it to make the hallway/balcony to access each apartment. I refine the balcony and then move on to extrude the hallway at the back to make the accessway and stairs. I then begin making the building floor and finishing the overall building. Once the building is done, I decide to make the base shape of the street the building is on and the surrounding buildings. This will open up more spaces for swinging shots of X Factor. I'm basing myself off a street, but I'm not truly recreating it 100%. However, it gives enough of the illusion of the city and an average street. Basing myself off of Google Maps reference makes it so the block feels lived in and I don't run into repeating the same kind of architecture, finishing our first location. For location 2, we will be doing a university. For this university, I like the cliché of having an old library building in the middle, which I'll begin modeling. I use a cube and begin molding it to the look I want. I add this little extrusion on the top to make an access to the rooftop, which could be used by X Factor. Then I move on to the entrance. I add loop cuts and extrude inside to make pillars. I add geometry to shape out the stairs. I fix the geometry so it doesn't get overblown, and then add the entrance to the library, making the centerpiece of the university. I then take the floor and begin extruding the block. This campus takes about a quarter of a block and makes this a decently big enough space for more interesting backdrops inside the school. I begin shaping the floor and extrude in sections for other buildings, like the arts building, the cooking building, the school theater, and the extra classrooms plus the basketball courts. Once the space has been determined, I select the geometry and extrude upwards the different buildings and detail them. Now this looks like a pretty decent backdrop for establishing an aerial shots. But obviously, we still need to have some shots inside the school during class, which is why I go to make the classroom space a model. I repeat the same steps as last building, adding a cube on the inside and then modeling it. However, I won't be connecting this one yet, because we don't really need to have shots inside the stairways for this. Given they are not an easy social space, I think it's wise to avoid them now. I'm not going to be doing a DOB Polnareff showdown anyways. The idea for this space is a 3-flight open space connected by these balconies, looking to the center of the rooms. The classrooms will be located at the sides, and you can have this open space for interactions and emptiness. I shape out the balcony bars so they don't look as boring. I then shape out the empty space to give room to the classrooms at the bottom. There are no classes being taken on other levels, so I don't need to even model doors for those levels. But the framing is interesting enough. I make cutouts to form the walls and shape out the main classroom, then battle with the geometry for a while. I begin modeling the door for the main classroom, adjust vertices, and then add the windows. Once the inside of the classroom is done, I model the walls of the university and the main entry door, finishing our second environment, getting us halfway there. Our first scenario is going to be a police station. This time, I want to play more with the Batman-Gordon-esque dynamic, so it's fair to say we'll be visiting this place a little often. I once again add another cube and stretch to the proportions needed. This police station is decently sized, in spite of what you might believe. Trust me, there are smaller ones. At this point, you know the drill. Add the rooms, individually shape it out, and add the doors to connect together. I make the general office room, an interrogation room, the bathrooms, and a little jail cell. I model the doors and decide to focus on jail cells. I make this shape to make 3 small detention cells, and begin subdividing to make the bars, which you can predict takes some time. Once the bars are done, I adjust the doors and connect the rooms individually, practically having finished this scenario. Now, we move on to the final scenario. This is a street outside an office building, which could be contrasting last model. As opposed to modeling an interior scene, we're just doing an exterior scene. Since we don't need to enter any of the buildings here, the base of this scenario is this particular office building. It's not that big, but will be the center focus around the action here. Since this is a pretty simpler scenario, we just shape out the building and extrude the floor to get the surrounding buildings. My main focus is to extrude the blocks and add the streets in the middle. I make this street bend so we don't need to extrude infinite buildings and cover that horizon, which will be the main horizon. I then select the streets and extrude them downwards, since I began from the block of the office building. I fill in the street so it looks nice. I extrude another street just to be sure, then adjust the main building, add some walls around it, add a loop cut, and then begin extruding the surrounding buildings. And this is a little extra model. Well, not so little, but still extra. This is an interior of another office that I'm exporting from another file where I was doing asset collections. What I need to do with this space is to just arrange the elements properly and adjust it to the office building I need it to be part of. But at least it works as a little teaser for what we'll be looking into for the next part, doing the mobiliary and props. And that was today's video. After last video suffering with the hair, I decided to change it up a little and to speed up the process. I hope you liked the video and be on the lookout for what's next. We're finally getting closer to publishing new chapters. Right now, I'm working on continuing the last chapter and finally transitioning into this new era of the comic. So stay tuned for that. Check out X-treme Superhero to be up to date when new chapters arrive. As always, like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss more content. Check out my Instagram. Since I'm about to finish my tarot card collection, I'm looking for some other projects to do, so leave your ideas in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and I'll see you around, pals!